really dark trunk on that. Then I'm going to go back in while it's still wet, of course. I'm going to pick up some of that Hooker's green, and I'm going to give a little bit of shading to my grass. We're going to go back and refine this a little bit more as we move on. I want to keep that horizontal stroke in here while I'm working. Hit the side of the road. Because remember, we've got that shadow of that tree that's going to go down here, so this area is going to be a little darker. But we want to give it a little depth. Go back in with just water to help blend these two areas a little better. There we go. Kind of like that. Now, blow dryer or give it about 10 minutes to dry. One technique we haven't talked about yet that we're going to try out today together is a dry on dry technique. So I'm going to get my brush just a little damp, but not very much at all. Okay, I'm going to pick up some of this burnt sienna, but keeping it, you can see how it even looks rough on the little feathered edges of the bristle. Okay, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some of this in here. And you can see when it's dry on dry, it has a real rough texture to it, which is what we're going to add to our fields a little bit, where there might be some dirt, especially coming off the sides of the road. And this takes a little bit of practice, so don't feel bad if it gets a little bumpy when you're first trying this out and you're like, this doesn't seem like it's working at all. It's either too wet or too dry. You really just have to keep experimenting with it a little bit until you get the hang of it. I'm going to go back in with a little water on this one yet even and thin it out some more. Kind of like this. And we're just giving a little bit of depth and color to our fields that are back in here. A little bit like grass. Keeping that horizontal pull. I'm going to rinse my brush out, and then I'm going to think about the shadow we talked about on our road. First I have to add that road in, so I'm going to grab some of the Payne's Gray, since most of the roads are kind of a blacky gray color. I go down and sketch that road out and put it in. It's going to be pretty light as it goes back there into the distance. I'm going to be careful of my paints on that side of the road. There we go. I want to keep those lines pulling towards us. We don't want them to really go other directions since it's a road, right? Like that. And then I'm going to lighten it up just a little more. I'm going to go back and pull up some of that paint. So patting it with a dry brush and then wiping it on my towel. And give it a little bit of texture while we're in there since it's a road. It won't be perfectly flat and smooth. That. And while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to go back over and grab some more of that Hooker's green real deep now. And we're going to start adding in, we're going to grab some of the ultramarine and adding in some different little plants and stuff that are maybe closer to us up here. And I'm just going back in with the ultramarine now to add some of the shadows and shading in. I always start with that base color, and then I go back in and add the darker colors. Like this. If I want, I can even go back and do just a smidge of green in my fields. Again, sort of dragging just to add some more of that color depth and interest in there like that. And then if I have the shadow we talked about from the other tree, right, that's maybe up here, it's going to come out more across the road. Don't Again, it's going to have different leaves, go in different directions, and sunlight coming through. So I want to leave that. And because it's on the road, we want to make sure we're keeping our Payne's gray in there, along with our blue. Kind of like that. As your road dries, you can even go back in and add some extra little highlight lines to reinforce the different trails or cracks that they have sometimes, right? Kind of like that. Maybe a few little pebbles and stones along the way. And then of course you're welcome to go in and play, you know, and darken up some of your shadows a little bit more if you want in your trees or your bushes or any place else. You want to go back and add in some extra areas of interest. Sometimes I go back and I add a few little branches that would show, not too many. You don't want to go crazy on branches because usually they're covered up by the leaves, but it helps to reinforce the tree shape sometimes, to add a few thin ones here and there that look like they're peeking out of the branches. And to go back in and reinforce your trunk just a little bit more to make sure it doesn't get lost too much among all of your leaves. And if it gets a little too light, you can go back in and add some of that yellow in places to highlight the lighter spots. Remember how we say the yellow fades pretty easily? So you can always go back in with the yellow along the edges, just a little bit like that. So you can play with this until you're happy with it and adding lots of little things here and there, or you can just be done with it and ready to move on to the next thing. That's part of learning to make more art and get it the way that you want it, and adding in all the little parts that make it yours.